Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends. Today I want to speak to the part of you that feels worn, tired, and weighed down by the mistakes of yesterday. There comes a time in our lives when holding on to who we once were only keeps us from who we are meant to become. Islam teaches us that Allah's mercy is vast and His guidance is always near. The old you, the regrets, the patterns, the chains of self-doubt, they do not define you. In fact, they are meant to be left behind. Today, I invite you to let go, to destroy the parts of yourself that no longer serve you, and to rebuild with Allah at the center. Because true transformation does not come from willpower alone, it comes from surrendering to the one who knows you best, the one who creates you anew each day. The path to your better self begins not with force, but with faith, and with the courage to trust Allah's plan for your heart, your mind, and your soul. The journey of destroying the old self begins with the simple yet profound recognition that we are not defined by the mistakes we have made, the regrets we carry, or the chains of patterns we have clung to for years. Every soul bears scars. Every heart carries weight. And yet Allah does not measure us by the burden we have carried, but by the intention to rise again, the willingness to submit to His guidance, and the courage to embrace transformation. Often, we become prisoners of our own pasts, clinging to habits that harm us, holding on to grudges that eat at our hearts, and justifying choices that distance us from peace. The first step in rebuilding with Allah is an honest confrontation with oneself, a moment of truth in which we acknowledge the parts of us that no longer serve His purpose for us, the parts that keep us from becoming the best version of ourselves. This recognition is not meant to drown us in guilt, but to illuminate the path forward, to reveal the corners of our hearts where light has been blocked, and to invite the mercy of Allah to seep into those shadows. There is a profound beauty in surrendering the old self, because in surrender lies freedom. The ego, the pride, the attachments to worldly desires, they are heavy weights on the soul, and each weight released is a step closer to purity, a step closer to aligning our hearts with the one who knows our deepest needs. To destroy the old self is not to erase the lessons it carried, but to release the patterns of thought and action that trap us in cycles of hurt and limitation. We are not called to reject our history, for every mistake, every lapse, every moment of weakness has shaped our understanding of mercy and reliance. Yet there comes a time when holding on to past versions of ourselves becomes a barrier to growth. Allah repeatedly reminds us in the Quran that He is the most merciful, the forgiving, the one who constantly renews our souls when we turn to Him. When we internalize this, we begin to see that no habit, no sin, no long-standing pattern is too heavy for His mercy. The old self, no matter how stubborn, is not permanent. It can be reformed, reshaped, and in some instances, dissolved into a new beginning that mirrors the light of Allah's guidance. This act of destruction is gentle yet firm. It is not violent self-punishment, nor is it despairing rejection, but a conscious, intentional letting go. We must look at each aspect of our lives, the thoughts that trap us, the words that harm us, the actions that distance us from peace, and place them before Allah with sincerity. In this act, the self begins to unburden, and the space for reconstruction begins to emerge. Rebuilding with Allah requires more than intention. It requires an intimate, sustained connection with Him. It requires prayer that is not merely habitual but heartfelt, where the lips utter words that the heart has already surrendered. It requires reflection, where we examine our hearts not for self-condemnation but for guidance. It requires an understanding that transformation is a process, a delicate weaving of patience, intention, and action under the careful watch of divine wisdom. Each prayer becomes a brick, each moment of mindfulness a foundation, and every act of sincere effort a beam that holds the new self in place. There is no quick fix, no overnight miracle of character. Rather, there is the steady rhythm of turning towards Allah, seeking His light, and allowing it to penetrate the corners of our hearts that have long been in darkness. In this rebuilding, we learn to align our desires with what is pleasing to Him, to remove from our lives the distractions and attachments that dilute our spiritual growth, and to cultivate habits of sincerity, gratitude, and humility. The process is not without struggle. As we attempt to leave behind old patterns, we encounter resistance within ourselves. Our own doubts, our insecurities, and the voices of past habits rise up to challenge the new direction. This resistance is natural, and it is a sign that the old self still exists within the heart. Yet Allah's guidance is constant, and He does not abandon those who strive sincerely. Through moments of reflection, through supplication, and through patience, we learn to recognize these internal battles not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. Each time we resist the pull of the old self, we strengthen our resolve. Each time we turn back to Allah despite the temptation to give in, we solidify the foundation of the new self. The rebuilding is both inward and outward. It is not merely about abandoning bad habits, but about cultivating positive ones that mirror the divine attributes. We cultivate patience, not as a forced endurance, but as a natural expression of reliance on Allah. We cultivate mercy, both towards ourselves and others, reflecting the infinite mercy we receive daily. We cultivate gratitude, recognizing that each breath, each moment, and each opportunity is a gift from the most merciful. Rebuilding requires clarity of intention. Without clarity, efforts can become scattered, and the self may falter in the face of old temptations. The clarity comes from asking ourselves fundamental questions. Who am I seeking to be? What does Allah want from me? How can my life reflect the light of His guidance? These questions are not theoretical. They require introspection, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. They invite us to examine our priorities, to align our actions with our faith, and to reject the illusions that the old self clings to. It is a daily exercise, a continuous commitment, because the soul is constantly tested, and the world is filled with distractions that threaten to pull us back into patterns we have vowed to leave behind. Yet, this constant effort is itself an act of worship. Each time we choose Allah over the fleeting desires of the old self, we solidify our transformation. Each small victory in thought, word, or action becomes a cornerstone of the rebuilt self. As we continue to rebuild, we begin to notice a shift in perspective. The burdens of the past lose their grip, and the mind becomes clearer, more focused on what truly matters. The heart softens, becoming a vessel for hope, compassion, and sincerity. The old self may whisper reminders of failure, but with each whisper, the voice of trust in Allah grows stronger, reminding us that His mercy surpasses our shortcomings. In this phase, we cultivate resilience, not as pride or stubbornness, but as a reflection of reliance on Allah. We understand that setbacks are not signs of inadequacy, but opportunities to return, to seek forgiveness, and to refine our intentions. The rebuilt self is not flawless, for perfection belongs only to Allah, but it is aligned, intentional, and anchored in faith. It carries within it the wisdom of past lessons and the light of divine guidance, a harmony between experience and spirituality. Every act of letting go, every moment of turning to Allah, and every effort to build anew strengthens the soul. We begin to see the interconnectedness of our intentions, actions, and spiritual state. The old self, when viewed through this lens, becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. Its failures and mistakes serve as contrasts, highlighting the mercy and power of Allah in allowing us to rise again. The process teaches humility, for we realize that we cannot rebuild alone. True transformation is never solely the product of willpower, but of submission to the one who shapes our hearts, who knows our struggles, and who provides guidance when we are lost. Through this understanding, reliance on Allah becomes both a comfort and a source of strength. We learn to place our trust fully in His wisdom, even when the process is painful or slow, recognizing that He knows what is best for us, even beyond our comprehension. As the old self fades and the new self emerges, we experience a sense of liberation. We no longer define ourselves by the limitations of yesterday. Our actions are guided not by fear of failure, but by hope in Allah's mercy. Our intentions are no longer tainted by selfish desires, but directed towards what pleases Him. The process of rebuilding becomes an ongoing journey of refinement, where each day offers an opportunity to shed another layer of old habits and to cultivate deeper faith. In this way, the destruction of the old self is inseparable from the creation of the new self. It is a dual process, removal and reconstruction, ending and beginning, letting go and embracing, all under the careful guidance of the most merciful. The journey of self-reconstruction through reliance on Allah begins with an understanding that transformation is not achieved by human effort alone, but through sincere intention, conscious action, and trust in the one who knows the innermost state of every heart. Often we look to external circumstances or fleeting motivation to bring change, but lasting transformation is a spiritual process that begins from within, rooted in the awareness that Allah is the ultimate guide and source of strength. To rebuild with Allah, one must first recognize the patterns of the old self, the habits and thought processes that have limited growth and clouded clarity. These may be moments of weakness, anger, selfishness, or neglect, patterns ingrained over years. Yet recognition does not imply condemnation. It is the first step towards liberation. The old self is not an enemy to be destroyed with violence, but a part of our journey that must be acknowledged, understood, and then consciously left behind with the guidance of Allah. This process is delicate, requiring patience, honesty, and unwavering sincerity in turning back to Allah. Reconstruction begins with reflection, the act of examining one's life in the light of divine guidance. Reflection is not merely intellectual, but spiritual. It is a moment of stillness where the heart converses with Allah, where the soul opens itself to His mercy and guidance. During reflection, one must ask, what parts of me are rooted in the old ways that harm me? What habits and thoughts prevent me from becoming closer to Allah? These questions are not easy, for they demand humility and courage. They require us to face our weaknesses without denial or self-pity, and yet they are necessary for growth. As we reflect, we begin to see the intricate connection between intention, action, and spiritual state. We recognize how small choices accumulate, shaping character and influencing the trajectory of our lives. With this awareness, we are better equipped to make conscious, intentional changes that align with the divine will. Prayer becomes a cornerstone of rebuilding. Not the ritual of prayer alone, but the heartfelt connection to Allah that transforms each moment into an opportunity for growth. Prayer teaches dependence, reminding us that we cannot rebuild alone and that seeking guidance is not a sign of weakness but a manifestation of faith. Each act of prayer is a conversation, a surrender, and an invitation for Allah's light to enter the corners of our lives that have long been darkened by old patterns. The rebuilt self is nurtured through these moments where we learn to replace reactive impulses with mindful responses guided by the remembrance of Allah. In this spiritual discipline, we find clarity, patience, and strength, the tools needed to construct a life aligned with divine purpose. The process of reconstruction also requires conscious effort in reshaping thoughts. The old self is often sustained by repetitive, unexamined thoughts that reinforce patterns of fear, doubt, or anger. To rebuild, one must cultivate awareness of these thoughts and gently replace them with reflections rooted in faith. For instance, when anxiety arises, it becomes an opportunity to remember that Allah is the most wise and that every challenge carries wisdom, even if unseen. When feelings of inadequacy emerge, they can be transformed into reminders of Allah's constant mercy and the limitless potential granted to every soul willing to strive sincerely. In this way, thought patterns are reoriented, creating a mental foundation that supports the rebuilding of character and action. Action follows intention and thought, translating reflection and prayer into tangible change. To rebuild with Allah is not merely to feel transformation, but to live it, to manifest the rebuilt self in behavior, relationships, and decisions. Actions become deliberate, shaped by moral consciousness, and aligned with principles of justice, compassion, and humility. Every choice becomes a brick in the new foundation, from the way one responds to anger, to the consistency in acts of worship, to the intentional cultivation of positive habits that replace harmful ones. Each step, no matter how small, contributes to a cumulative transformation that gradually dissolves the hold of the old self and strengthens reliance on Allah. The rebuilt self is resilient, not because it is free from struggle, but because it has learned to root every challenge in the awareness of Allah's presence and guidance. Reliance on Allah is essential because the path of reconstruction is rarely linear. Old habits, societal pressures, and personal doubts continuously challenge the process. In moments of frustration, it is easy to feel defeated, to question the possibility of change, or to slip back into familiar patterns. Yet these moments are not signs of failure. They are invitations to deepen reliance on Allah, to renew intention, and to understand that transformation is gradual. Setbacks are part of the spiritual journey, offering insight into areas that require deeper attention and patience. Each return to Allah after a slip is itself a victory, reinforcing the principle that progress is measured not by perfection, but by persistence and sincerity. In this understanding, the soul learns resilience, hope, and humility, recognizing that ultimate success rests in divine guidance rather than self-reliance. The rebuilt self grows not only in discipline, but in character and empathy. As the old self's limitations are released, the heart expands to embrace mercy, forgiveness, and compassion. Relationships with others transform, reflecting the internal reconstruction. Where once there may have been resentment or indifference, there is now understanding and patience. Where there was self-centeredness, there emerges generosity and concern for the well-being of others. These external manifestations are natural outcomes of an internal process rooted in Allah's guidance. The rebuilt self is not isolated. It radiates the influence of divine alignment in every interaction, demonstrating the profound connection between spiritual reconstruction and the quality of life lived in accordance with faith. Consistency is critical. Reconstruction is not a one-time act, but a continuous process. Daily choices, repeated intentions, and sustained reliance on Allah consolidate the new self. Rituals of worship, reflection, and mindfulness provide rhythm and structure, anchoring the soul in a cycle of renewal. Each day presents opportunities to reinforce positive habits, strengthen reliance on Allah, and further distance from the old self. Awareness of this continuity prevents complacency, reminding us that spiritual growth requires vigilance, commitment, and sincere effort. The rebuilt self is thus a living, evolving entity, constantly refined through intention, action, and divine guidance. Self-compassion is another vital aspect. As we reconstruct, there will inevitably be moments of weakness, doubt, or frustration. The rebuilt self responds not with harsh judgment, but with patience, understanding, and trust in Allah's mercy. Recognizing that perfection belongs only to Allah, one approaches personal shortcomings with humility and determination, using each experience as a stepping stone toward greater alignment with divine guidance. This compassionate approach ensures that the process of reconstruction is sustainable and transformative, rather than exhausting and discouraging. The reconstructed self gradually develops clarity of purpose. As old habits fade and reliance on Allah deepens, the soul begins to discern what truly matters in life. Priorities shift from transient worldly concerns to enduring spiritually meaningful goals. Choices, actions, and relationships are evaluated through the lens of divine guidance, ensuring that the path followed is not arbitrary but intentional. This clarity brings peace, focus, and resilience, as the soul no longer seeks validation in external measures but finds fulfillment in alignment with Allah's will. The mind becomes a tool of insight rather than a source of confusion, and the heart a vessel for sincerity, gratitude, and mercy. Through this process, one begins to internalize the profound truth that transformation is not about erasing the past, but about embracing it with wisdom, leaving behind harmful patterns, and consciously shaping a future aligned with Allah's guidance. The rebuilt self is thus anchored in a deep understanding of divine wisdom, fortified by spiritual practice, and enlivened by hope and faith. Each thought, intention, and action reflects the ongoing work of reconstruction, revealing a soul that is resilient, aware, and intimately connected to the source of guidance. Reconstruction also deepens humility. The rebuilt self recognizes that it is neither the sole architect nor the ultimate judge of transformation. Change occurs not by personal strength alone, but through surrender to Allah's wisdom, mercy, and guidance. This awareness fosters gratitude, humility, and a sense of reliance that permeates all aspects of life. In every challenge, the soul turns to Allah for insight and support. In every success, it acknowledges that blessings are not earned by self alone, but granted by the most merciful. Humility ensures that the rebuilt self remains anchored, focused, and spiritually balanced, preventing arrogance and fostering sincerity. Patience is intertwined with humility and reliance. Transformation is gradual, and the rebuilt self learns to accept the pace of progress dictated by divine wisdom. Impatience, frustration, or self-criticism can hinder growth, but patience cultivates resilience, trust, and perseverance. Each step, no matter how small, becomes part of a larger trajectory, guided by Allah's timing and purpose. Through patience, the soul learns to celebrate incremental progress, to find meaning in struggle, and to remain steadfast in the pursuit of alignment with divine guidance. The process of reconstruction also enriches the inner life with spiritual awareness. As reliance on Allah deepens, the soul becomes more sensitive to divine signs, reminders, and guidance. Moments of reflection, prayer, and meditation reveal insights into character, intention, and spiritual state. The rebuilt self develops discernment, recognizing opportunities for growth, avoiding harmful patterns, and cultivating habits that nurture alignment with Allah. Spiritual awareness ensures that reconstruction is not superficial, but profound, affecting thought, action, emotion, and intention at every level. As the journey unfolds, the rebuilt self experiences liberation from the chains of the old self. Patterns of negativity, fear, and limitation lose their grip. The mind, heart, and soul gain clarity, strength, and resilience. The rebuilt self is not perfect, but grounded in faith, intention, and alignment with Allah. It acts consciously, responds thoughtfully, and embraces life with hope, trust, and gratitude. The process demonstrates that genuine transformation is a spiritual endeavor, one that requires sincerity, reliance, patience, and humility. Through consistent reflection, prayer, action, and reliance on Allah, the self is gradually reshaped into a vessel capable of sustaining virtue, resilience, and spiritual fulfillment. The old self, while remembered for lessons learned, no longer dominates behavior, thought, or intention. The rebuilt self embodies conscious alignment with divine guidance, manifesting in character, relationships, and purposeful living. Each day offers the opportunity to reinforce progress, deepen reliance on Allah, and refine the qualities of patience, mercy, gratitude, and humility. Transformation is never instantaneous. The journey of embracing patience and mercy during self-reconstruction begins with the understanding that change, especially the change guided by Allah, is a gradual process. The heart must be nurtured with compassion, both towards itself and towards others, as this is the soil from which true growth arises. Too often, the human spirit seeks immediate perfection and becomes frustrated with the natural pace of transformation. Yet Allah reminds us that He is most merciful, and His guidance unfolds according to His wisdom, which surpasses our comprehension. In recognizing this, the soul begins to release harsh judgment and self-condemnation, understanding that setbacks are not signs of failure, but opportunities for renewed effort and deeper reliance on divine guidance. The patience we cultivate in ourselves mirrors the infinite patience of Allah, and the mercy we extend to ourselves becomes a reflection of the mercy we continuously receive from Him. Patience is not merely waiting, but active endurance. It is the conscious choice to continue striving despite difficulty, to remain steadfast when old habits attempt to reclaim their hold, and to persist when the heart feels weary. In the process of rebuilding with Allah, patience becomes a spiritual discipline that reinforces reliance. Each act of restraint, each deliberate choice to act with awareness rather than impulse, is an expression of faith. When the old self resurfaces, whether in the form of doubt, fear, or habitual patterns, patience allows the soul to respond without despair. It teaches that setbacks are temporary, that divine guidance is constant, and that the process of transformation is continuous, not linear. Patience becomes a tool through which the soul cultivates resilience, develops insight, and strengthens its connection to Allah. Mercy complements patience. As the soul endures struggle, it must learn to treat itself with kindness and compassion. Self-recrimination for past mistakes or perceived weaknesses can erode progress and dampen hope. Instead, mercy allows the heart to acknowledge imperfection without surrendering to despair. Every lapse becomes a lesson rather than a burden. Every moment of weakness an opportunity to return to Allah and realign intention. By cultivating mercy within, the soul learns to extend the same compassion outward, fostering harmonious relationships, understanding, and empathy for others. This dual cultivation of patience and mercy creates a balanced, resilient self that can withstand challenges while remaining connected to Allah's guidance. The journey of transformation also requires the heart to be attuned to divine timing. The rebuilt self does not force immediate results, but trusts in the process and the wisdom of Allah. Patience allows for this trust to deepen as the soul observes that change unfolds according to divine decree, not human expectation. Each stage of growth, even those that seem slow or imperceptible, contributes to the overall process of reconstruction. Moments of stagnation are reframed as opportunities for reflection, learning, and strengthening reliance on Allah. In this way, patience becomes a spiritual lens through which every experience, whether challenging or seemingly mundane, is imbued with purpose and potential for growth. Mercy within the self also creates space for gratitude. As we allow patience to temper frustration and mercy to soften judgment, the soul becomes more aware of the blessings already present. Gratitude transforms perspective, allowing the heart to see progress even amidst struggle. Each small act of alignment with Allah, every effort to resist old patterns, becomes a reason for thanks. Gratitude reinforces reliance, for it acknowledges that every success, however minor, is facilitated by divine guidance. The rebuilt self learns to celebrate incremental victories, fostering motivation and hope while maintaining humility. This awareness of blessings nurtures contentment and strengthens the heart against the impatience that so often arises in the pursuit of transformation. Patience and mercy also interact with self-awareness. In the process of rebuilding, the soul must continually observe thoughts, intentions, and behaviors, recognizing where the old self may still exert influence. Rather than reacting with frustration or judgment, the rebuilt self responds with patience, understanding that awareness is the first step toward change. Mercy allows the heart to accept temporary setbacks, creating a compassionate inner dialogue that encourages persistence. Together, patience and mercy foster an environment where sustained effort is possible, where the soul can endure challenges without succumbing to discouragement, and where divine guidance is continually sought and applied. The rebuilt self, nurtured with patience and mercy, also develops resilience in relationships. Old patterns of defensiveness, anger, or withdrawal are replaced with intentional responses grounded in empathy and understanding. When confronted with criticism, conflict, or misunderstanding, the heart trained in patience responds thoughtfully rather than impulsively. mercy softens reactions, allowing forgiveness and compassion to guide interactions. This transformation is not superficial. It is rooted in a spiritual discipline that reshapes character and strengthens connections with others. By embodying patience and mercy, the self becomes a reflection of divine attributes, demonstrating the profound impact of spiritual reconstruction on both internal